My name is Johnny, 58 years old, retired construction engineer from Seattle. 6 months before my daughter's wedding, I received news that changed my life forever. My father had left me $10 million in his will. I decided not to tell Sarah about this inheritance before her big day. Sitting alone in my modest home, staring at the legal documents, I felt both guilty and strangely certain about my decision. Before I tell you what happened after the wedding that made me thankful for keeping this secret, let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever trusted your gut feeling, even when it made you uncomfortable. I've always had a special bond with my daughter Sarah. We became especially close after my wife Julie passed away from breast cancer when Sarah was only 10 years old. Those first few months were the hardest of my life. I had to learn things I never thought I'd need to know: how to braid hair, how to talk about puberty, how to be both mother and father to a heartbroken little girl. Every morning I'd wake up an hour early just to make sure her lunch was packed properly and her clothes matched. Julie had always handled those things. I remember the first time Sarah had a school dance, and I had to figure out how to help her get ready. We watched YouTube tutorials together on how to do a simple updo, both of us laughing at my clumsy attempts. It took 7 tries, but we finally got it right. Despite working full-time as a construction engineer, I never missed a parent-teacher conference or dance recital. I rearranged my schedule constantly to be there for every important moment. The other parents, mostly mothers, would sometimes look at me with a mixture of pity and admiration. The single dad doing his best. But I never wanted pity. I just wanted Sarah to have as normal and happy a childhood as possible. When Sarah turned 16, I taught her how to drive in an empty parking lot, gripping the dashboard so tightly my knuckles turned white. She teased me about being nervous, but got quiet when I explained that I was just scared of losing her too. After that, she became the most careful teenage driver I'd ever seen. The proudest moment of my life was when Sarah received her acceptance letter to the University of Washington's architecture program. She had inherited my love for building and design, but took it in her own creative direction. We stayed up all night talking about her dreams of designing sustainable housing that regular families could afford. She had her mother's compassion and my practical mindset, the perfect combination. Throughout college, Sarah remained grounded. She worked part-time jobs to cover her spending money, even though I offered to help more. "Dad, you've done enough," she'd tell me. "I need to learn to stand on my own 2 feet." After graduation, she landed a job at a respected architecture firm in Seattle and completely refused any financial help from me. "You paid for my education, Dad. The rest is on me," she insisted. I respected her independence, even though I would have happily helped with her apartment deposit or first month's rent. That's the kind of person Sarah is, determined to make her own way. We maintained our close relationship into her adulthood. Sunday dinners became our tradition, and she'd call me at least twice a week just to chat. She'd tell me about her projects at work, and I'd bore her with stories about my retirement hobbies, woodworking, and volunteering with Habitat for Humanity. Sarah was always proud of our middle-class lifestyle. She never seemed to crave luxury or status. When her friends would talk about designer clothes or expensive vacations, Sarah would shrug it off. "I'd rather save for something that matters," she'd say. I thought I had raised a daughter who valued substance over style, who understood that hard work and character matter more than money or possessions. Looking back now, I realize I may have overemphasized frugality and self-reliance. In trying to teach her good values, I might have created a vulnerability I never anticipated. But that's getting ahead of myself. The truth is, despite whatever mistakes I made as a father, Sarah was and remains the greatest achievement of my life, far more valuable than any construction project I ever managed or any amount of money I might inherit. To understand why I kept the inheritance a secret, You need to know about my complicated relationship with my father, Walter. He wasn't an affectionate man. Cold, demanding, and utterly devoted to building his real estate development company, Walter Stone, was respected in business circles, but a stranger in his own home. My childhood memories of him mostly involve his absence or his criticism. He missed birthdays because of business meetings. When I brought home a report card with all A's and 1 B, he'd focus only on the B. "Second place is just the first loser, Johnny," he'd say. Nothing was ever good enough. My mother tried to compensate for his emotional distance, explaining that his own father had been even harsher. "He doesn't know any other way to show love except by pushing you to succeed," she'd tell me. But as a child, all I wanted was a dad who would play catch or ask about my day without turning it into a lesson about business strategy. The breaking point came when I turned 22. I had just graduated with my engineering degree, and instead of congratulating me, my father handed me a company ID badge. "Time to put away childish things," he said. "You'll start in the acquisitions department on Monday." I had never agreed to join the family business. In fact, I had already accepted a position with a construction company that was building innovative, environmentally friendly homes. When I told him about my plans, his face turned red with anger. "I built this company for you," he shouted. "Everything I've done has been to give you a future, and this is how you repay me, by playing with hammers and nails. I want to build things that matter," I tried to explain. "Things people actually use, not just investment properties that sit empty half the year." He slammed his fist on the table. "Then you're on your own. Don't expect a dime from me if you walk away." And I did walk away. For almost 20 years, we barely spoke. He didn't attend my wedding to Julie. When Sarah was born, I sent him a birth announcement, but he never responded. Mom would occasionally update me on his life during our weekly calls, but she learned not to push for reconciliation. It wasn't until after Mom died, and Walter had his first heart attack, that something changed. I was 39. Sarah was 6, and Julie was still healthy and vibrant. Walter called me from his hospital bed. "Johnny," he said, his voice unusually soft, "I'd like to meet my granddaughter." That first visit was awkward. Sarah, always perceptive, clung to Julie's hand and observed her grandfather with cautious eyes. Walter, for his part, seemed at a loss for what to do with a child. He had brought an expensive doll that Sarah politely thanked him for, but never played with. Gradually, over the years, something like a relationship formed between us. Walter never explicitly apologized for the past, but he started to show up differently. He'd ask about my projects with genuine interest. He attended Sarah's elementary school graduation. When Julie got sick, he silently paid for a night nurse so I could get some rest. After Julie died, Walter became more present in our lives. He'd invite us to dinner once a month, awkwardly trying to connect with Sarah, who was now dealing with her own grief. He never flaunted his wealth around her, never tried to buy her affection with extravagant gifts. In fact, he seemed to respect the values Julie and I had instilled in her. "You've done well with her, Johnny," he told me once, which might have been the only straightforward compliment he ever gave me. The biggest surprise came when Walter was diagnosed with advanced heart disease at 78. During one of my visits to his hospital room, he looked at me with unusual vulnerability. "I was wrong about a lot of things, son," he said, staring at the ceiling. "I thought success was about the bottom line, about winning. I pushed you because I thought that was what fathers were supposed to do." He paused for so long, I thought he might have fallen asleep. "I missed everything that mattered." Walter died 6 months before Sarah's wedding. The funeral was well attended by business associates, but few personal friends. Sarah stood beside me, holding my hand, just like she had as a little girl, meeting her grandfather for the first time. 2 weeks later, Walter's lawyer called me to his office. I expected some small bequest, perhaps a family keepsake or a token amount. Instead, I learned that Walter had left me everything. his entire estate valued at over $10 million, plus full ownership of Stone real estate development. He restructured his will 5 years ago, the lawyer explained. He wanted you to have it all, with no conditions attached. I sat in stunned silence, the documents blurring before my eyes. Was this my father's way of apologizing? His attempt to make amends from beyond the grave? Or was it just another attempt to pull me into the world he had always wanted for me? As I drove home that day, I struggled with what to do next. Sarah's wedding was in 6 months. Should I tell her about this sudden windfall? Would it change our relationship? Would it change her relationship with her fiancé? After much thought, I decided to keep it to myself, at least until after the wedding. I wanted Sarah to marry for love, not money. I wanted her day to be about her future, not my sudden wealth. Looking back now, it might have been the wisest decision I ever made, though not for reasons I could have anticipated. I first met Marcus 2 years before the wedding. Sarah brought him home for dinner, her eyes bright with excitement. "Dad, this is Marcus," she said. "He's really special." Marcus Wilson was undeniably handsome, tall, with perfectly styled dark hair and a dazzling smile. He worked in financial services in New York, but had recently transferred to the Seattle office. As he shook my hand with a firm grip, I noticed his tailored suit and designer watch. "It's a pleasure to meet you, sir," he said, with practiced charm. "Sarah talks about you all the time." Throughout dinner, Marcus dominated the conversation. He told stories about celebrities he'd supposedly met, expensive restaurants he frequented, and the luxury condo he was leasing downtown. Sarah seemed captivated, laughing at all his jokes and looking at him with adoration. I noticed she barely touched her food, something she did when she was nervous or trying to impress someone. "So, Johnny," Marcus said, using my first name without asking permission. "Sarah tells me you were in construction before retiring." "Yes, I was a structural engineer for 30 years, I replied. "Helped build some of the office towers downtown." "Fascinating," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Must be quite different from the financial world. Much simpler, I imagine." I caught something in his expression, a fleeting look of superiority that made me uncomfortable, but I brushed it aside. Sarah was happy, and that was what mattered. As the relationship progressed, I tried to get to know Marcus better. I invited him to watch Seahawks games, offered to take him fishing at my favorite spot on the Skagit River. He always had excuses: work calls, prior commitments, or simply claiming those activities weren't really his thing. When they did visit, Marcus was perpetually checking his phone, responding to urgent messages. He would ask me superficial questions about my life, but never seemed to listen to the answers. Whenever I mentioned something about Sarah's childhood or her mother, he would nod absently and change the subject. One Sunday afternoon, while Sarah was helping me clean up after lunch, I gently asked her about Marcus's background. "He seems very focused on his career and lifestyle. What's his family like?" "They're from Boston," she said vaguely. "His dad is in banking too. They don't talk much." "And what about his previous relationships? Was he ever close to marriage before?" Sarah frowned. "Dad." "What's with the interrogation?" "Marcus is a good guy. He takes care of me, and he's really smart about money. You should see how he's helping me plan for retirement already." I backed off immediately. "I'm not interrogating, honey. Just trying to get to know the man my daughter loves." She softened. "I know, Dad. Sorry. It's just, Marcus is different from the guys around here. He's ambitious and sophisticated. Sometimes I worry you don't approve, because he's not more like, well, like you." That stung, but I understood what she meant. Marcus represented a different world, one of wealth status and connections, a world I had deliberately walked away from when I cut ties with my father. Had I somehow made Sarah feel that her middle-class upbringing was a limitation rather than a foundation? when Marcus proposed 6 months later with a diamond ring that must have cost several months of his salary. Sarah was ecstatic. She called me immediately. "Dad, I'm engaged." Marcus proposed at Canlis during dinner. "The ring is beautiful. We're thinking about a spring wedding. Are you happy for me?" "Of course I am, sweetheart," I said, pushing aside my reservations. "If he makes you happy, then I'm happy." "He does, Dad. He really does." I hung up the phone and looked at the photo of Julie on my desk. "I hope I'm doing right by our girl," I whispered. "I hope she's found someone who loves her for who she is." 6 months later, when the inheritance came, my concerns about Marcus were the main reason I decided to keep it quiet. I couldn't explain it, but something in my gut told me to wait. Call it a father's intuition, or just plain suspicion. But I didn't want Marcus to know about the money until I was more certain of his character and intentions. The wedding planning began almost immediately, and I quickly realized this would be no simple affair. Sarah and Marcus scheduled an appointment with me to discuss their vision. "We're looking at the Edgewater Hotel," Sarah told me, referring to Seattle's luxury waterfront venue. "They have a perfect ballroom overlooking Elliott Bay." Marcus pulled out a detailed spreadsheet on his tablet. "We're estimating costs at around $115,000. That includes the venue catering for 300 guests, top-shelf open bar, floral arrangements, photography, and a live band." I nearly choked on my coffee. The amount was staggering, more than twice what I had paid for my house in the 90s. "That's quite a celebration," I managed to say. "Only the best for Sarah," Marcus said, putting his arm around her shoulders. "We're only getting married once, right? How are you planning to pay for all this?" I asked. Trying to sound casual. "I've got it covered," Marcus said confidently. "Year-end bonus is coming up. Plus, I've been saving for something special like this. Don't worry about the costs, Johnny. Money isn't an issue." "Actually," I said, "I'd like to contribute. I've been saving for Sarah's wedding since she was born." This wasn't entirely true, but I did have about $30,000 set aside from my retirement fund that I could spare. "I can put in $30,000, I offered. Marcus's smile tightened slightly. "That's generous, Johnny. But really, $30,000 doesn't go very far with modern wedding costs. Tell you what, why don't you cover the rehearsal dinner instead? Keep your savings for your retirement." There was something condescending in his tone that bothered me, but Sarah jumped in before I could respond. "That would be perfect, Dad. The rehearsal dinner will be so special, and it means a lot that you want to help." So I agreed, swallowing my pride and the feeling that I was being sidelined in my own daughter's wedding. The rehearsal dinner would cost about $5,000, a significant amount, but nowhere near what I had offered to contribute. As the wedding preparations continued, I noticed subtle changes in Sarah. She started wearing more expensive clothes. Her practical Honda remained parked at her apartment while she drove around in Marcus's BMW. She talked about neighborhoods in Seattle I knew she couldn't afford on her architect's salary. "Marcus says we should think about Laurelhurst or Madison Park for our first home," she told me during one of our increasingly rare Sunday dinners. "The market there is really strong for investment purposes." "Those are million-dollar neighborhoods, Sarah," I pointed out gently. "That's quite a stretch on your salaries." "Marcus has some investment strategies," she said vaguely. "Plus, we don't plan to stay in starter homes for long. It's all about building equity and leveraging assets." She was using terms I'd never heard from her before, speaking with a confidence that seemed borrowed rather than earned. I missed my practical, down-to-earth daughter, who had once dreamed of designing affordable housing. One evening, about 2 months before the wedding, Sarah asked me an unexpected question. "Dad, did Grandpa Walter leave you anything when he died? I mean, he owned that big real estate company, right?" The question caught me off guard. "Why do you ask?" She shrugged, trying to look casual. "Just curious. Marcus and I were talking about family estates and inheritance planning. He's very forward-thinking about finances. I chose my words carefully. Your grandfather and I had a complicated relationship, as you know. We'd only recently reconciled when he passed away. But surely he left you something even a small percentage of his company would be valuable. Sarah, I said firmly, your grandfather's estate is still being settled. It's a complex process. This wasn't technically a lie. I had indeed not yet taken control of all the assets as the lawyers were still handling the transfers. Why is this coming up now? No reason, she said quickly. Just making conversation. A few days later, I received a call from Tom Harrison, an old colleague who still worked in the construction industry. Johnny, strange thing happened yesterday. Got a call from some finance guy asking about Walter Stone's company and whether you were taking over as CEO. Said he was doing market research. Name was Wilson. Isn't that your future son-in-law's last name? A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Why was Marcus investigating my father's company? My concerns deepened when I met Marcus's mother, Diane, for lunch the week before the wedding. She had flown in early to help with final preparations. Marcus was conspicuously absent, citing a crucial client meeting. Diane was a pleasant, unpretentious woman who seemed somewhat bewildered by the scale of the wedding. Marcus always did have expensive tastes, she said with a nervous laugh. Even as a boy, he wanted the best of everything. After a glass of wine, she became more candid. I worry about him sometimes. He gets in over his head. The credit card debt, the loans. His father and I bailed him out twice already. Credit card debt, I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Oh, it's been a problem since college. He just can't seem to live within his means. She leaned forward. Has he talked to you about his job situation? The termination from Bradshaw Financial. Termination. He told Sarah he transferred from their New York office. Diane's face fell. Oh dear, I assumed you knew. He was let go about 6 months ago. Something about client complaints. She twisted her napkin anxiously. I thought maybe you were helping them financially given the wedding and that apartment they're renting. By the time our lunch ended, I had learned that Marcus was not the successful financial advisor he claimed to be. He had been fired from his last 2 positions, was deeply in debt, and had a pattern of exaggerating his connections and achievements. I drove home in a daze, unsure what to do with this information. Should I tell Sarah? Would she even believe me? Would it look like I was trying to sabotage her relationship just before the wedding? That evening I called Sarah and suggested we meet for coffee, just the 2 of us. At the cafe, I carefully broached my concerns. Honey, I've been thinking about your future with Marcus. Are you sure you know everything you need to know about him, about his financial situation, his career? Her expression hardened immediately. What exactly are you implying, Dad? I'm not implying anything. I'm just asking if you've had detailed, honest conversations about money and career goals. Of course we have. Marcus is brilliant with finances. That's his entire career. And you've seen his credit reports, his bank statements. You know about his previous employment. Sarah's face flushed with anger. No, I haven't demanded to see his bank statements because I trust him. What is this really about, Dad? Is it because he comes from money, because he's not salt of the earth like us? Or are you just having trouble letting me go? Sarah, this isn't about me or my feelings. It's about making sure you're going into this marriage with open eyes. My eyes are wide open, she snapped, gathering her purse. I see a father who can't accept that his daughter has found a man who can give her a better life than he provided. I thought you'd be happy for me, Dad. She left the cafe before I could respond, and she didn't answer my calls that night. The next day, she sent a terse text. I'm still expecting you at the rehearsal dinner tomorrow. Please don't bring up these concerns again. It's my life and my choice. Despite everything I had learned, and my growing certainty that Marcus was not who he claimed to be, I decided not to reveal my inheritance. It felt like the wrong time, the wrong circumstance. And perhaps selfishly, I wasn't ready to share that information with someone I increasingly distrusted. So I kept quiet and hoped that somehow things would work out. The wedding day arrived with perfect Seattle weather, unusually sunny for spring, with Mount Rainier visible in the distance. The Edgewater Hotel looked spectacular, decorated with thousands of white roses and crystal accents that caught the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay. I felt distinctly out of place among the 300 guests, many of whom were Marcus's supposed connections from the finance world. Men in bespoke suits and women dripping in designer labels, air-kissed and talked loudly about summer homes and recent travels to exotic locations. I recognized few faces beyond our small extended family and a handful of Sarah's college friends. In the groom's suite, Marcus was holding court with his groomsmen, a tumbler of expensive scotch in hand. He barely acknowledged me when I stopped by to give Sarah's gift to him, a simple watch that had belonged to my father. "Thanks, Johnny," he said, barely glancing at it before setting it aside. "Hey, while you're here, I've been meaning to ask if you're planning any changes at Stone Real Estate now that it's yours. I know some investors who might be interested in partnerships." I blinked in surprise. "How did you know about that?" He shrugged. "Small world in finance. Word gets around. We should talk business after the honeymoon." And before I could respond, his best man called him over for photos, and I was left standing there, disturbed by his knowledge and his presumption. The ceremony itself was beautiful. When I saw Sarah in her gown, looking so much like her mother, my throat tightened with emotion. Walking her down the aisle, her arm linked through mine, I was transported back to the days when I would carry her to bed after she fell asleep on the couch, or when I taught her to ride a bike, running alongside to catch her if she fell. "You look just like your mom," I whispered as we approached the altar. "Do you think she'd be happy, Dad?" Sarah asked, a trace of uncertainty in her voice. "She'd want whatever brings you joy," I answered honestly. Then I placed her hand in Marcus's, feeling the ceremonial weight of giving my daughter to another man's care, a man I didn't fully trust. During the reception, I gave my required father of the bride toast, keeping it brief and emotional. I spoke about Sarah's compassion, her creativity, her resilience, after losing her mother. I carefully avoided saying much about Marcus, focusing instead on wishing them both happiness and growth together. As I returned to my seat, I overheard a conversation at a nearby table. A man I didn't recognize was talking to another guest. "Yeah, Wilson's finally landed his whale. Been talking about this big inheritance plan for months at the club. Says his father-in-law is sitting on a gold mine and doesn't even realize it." I froze, pretending to adjust my tie while listening more carefully. The old man inherited some real estate empire, according to Marcus. Says the guy doesn't have the first clue how to leverage it. Plans to offer his expertise right after the honeymoon. My stomach tightened. I made my way across the reception hall, nodding politely to guests, but increasingly anxious to learn more. Near the bar, I recognized a face. Michael Thornton, who Sarah had mentioned was a former colleague of Marcus from New York. "Beautiful wedding," I said, introducing myself. "I understand you worked with Marcus in New York." Michael looked uncomfortable. "Ah, yes, briefly. At Bradshaw Financial. He speaks highly of his time there," I ventured. "Said the transfer to Seattle was a great career move." Michael nearly choked on his drink. "Transfer. Is that what he's calling it?" He seemed to realize his mistake immediately. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. Excuse me, I need to find my wife." Throughout the reception, I collected more troubling information through casual conversations. Marcus had not been truthfully representing his career, his finances, or his intentions. And somehow he had learned about my inheritance. As the evening wore on, I watched Sarah and Marcus dance, accepting congratulations, looking for all the world like the perfect couple. Sarah appeared happy, if a bit tired. Marcus kept whispering in her ear, making her laugh. I wondered if I was making too much of things. Perhaps he really did love her. Perhaps his financial troubles were temporary setbacks rather than character flaws. Then I overheard him on his phone, in a secluded corner of the terrace, speaking urgently. "Everything's on schedule. The marriage certificate gets filed tomorrow. The honeymoon gives us a month to set everything up. By the time we get back, I'll have access to the accounts. No, the old man doesn't suspect a thing. He thinks I don't know about the inheritance." I slipped away before he could see me, my worst fears confirmed. That night after the newlyweds departed for their hotel, I called my lawyer and asked him to meet me first thing in the morning. Then I contacted a private investigator recommended by a former client. If Marcus was planning something, I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. The next day, Sarah and Marcus left for their month-long honeymoon in Bali, an extravagant trip that I now wondered how they were financing. As they departed, I hugged Sarah tightly. "I love you, sweetheart. Call me when you can." "Love you too, Dad," she said, looking genuinely happy. "Try not to worry so much. Everything's perfect now." Marcus gave me a confident handshake. "We'll talk business when I get back, Johnny. I have some great ideas for Stone real estate." As I watched their taxi pull away, I felt a mixture of dread and determination. I had a month to discover the truth and figure out how to protect both my daughter and my inheritance. Later that same day, I received a call from my bank's fraud department. Someone had attempted to access information about my accounts using my personal information. The attempt had been flagged as suspicious and blocked. When I asked for details, the representative mentioned that the person had claimed to be my financial advisor and had significant personal information about me, including my social security number. I thanked the representative and immediately placed extra security measures on all my accounts. Then I contacted my lawyer again. Things were moving faster than I'd anticipated, and I needed to be prepared. Within 3 days, the private investigator delivered his preliminary report, and it was worse than I had imagined. Marcus Wilson's real name was Marcus Weissman. He had legally changed it 5 years ago after his first bankruptcy. He had been married and divorced twice before, information he had concealed from Sarah. Both divorces involved financial disputes with his second wife, accusing him of emptying their joint accounts before filing for separation. Marcus had indeed been fired from Bradshaw Financial, not for client complaints as his mother suggested, but for suspected embezzlement. The firm had chosen not to press charges in exchange for his quiet resignation. His current job was largely fictitious. He did some commission-based work for a small investment firm, but had not closed a significant deal in over a year. Most disturbing was his current financial situation. Marcus owed more than $300,000 in various debts. Credit cards, personal loans, gambling debts to private parties, and unpaid taxes. He had been making minimum payments to avoid collections while maintaining the facade of wealth. The investigator had also uncovered evidence that Marcus had been systematically researching my father, his company, and me for at least a year. Around the time he first met Sarah, there were records of him accessing public information about Walter's estate filing, searching through business records, and even paying for background reports on me. In my professional opinion, the investigator concluded, "Mr. Weissman, or Wilson, deliberately targeted your daughter as a way to access your family's wealth. This appears to be a calculated long con, not just opportunism." I sat in stunned silence after reading the report. How could I have missed the signs? How could Sarah, who was usually so perceptive, have been taken in so completely? My lawyer advised me to take immediate protective action. Within 2 weeks, I had transferred most of the inheritance into an irrevocable trust with carefully chosen trustees. The trust was structured so that neither I nor Sarah could access the principal without multiple approvals, effectively insulating it from potential claims by Marcus. I maintained control of enough liquid assets to live comfortably and help Sarah if needed, but the bulk of the wealth was secured. I also implemented a succession plan for Stone real estate that would prevent any quick takeover or asset stripping. The company would continue operating under the existing management team with oversight from trusted board members. Any significant changes would require multiple approvals and extended timeframes. While I was securing these protections, Sarah called a few times from Bali. The first calls were upbeat. Descriptions of beautiful beaches, luxurious accommodations, delicious food. But as the honeymoon continued, I noticed a change in her tone. "Marcus is working most days," she mentioned during our third call. "He says there's a big deal he can't step away from even on our honeymoon. He's on his laptop for hours." "That's disappointing," I said carefully. "I thought this time was meant for you two to connect." "It's fine," she said, though her voice suggested otherwise. "He says once this deal closes, we'll have even more financial security. He's doing it for us." During our last call before their scheduled return, Sarah sounded genuinely unhappy. "Dad, I think Marcus has been keeping things from me. I found some documents in his briefcase, past due notices collection letters. When I asked him about them, he got really angry and said I was snooping." "Are you safe?" I asked immediately, my concern for her physical well-being overriding everything else. "Yes, of course," she said quickly. "He didn't hurt me or anything like that. I've never seen him so angry. He said I need to trust him and stop questioning his financial decisions." "Sarah, listen to me," I said firmly. "If at any point you feel unsafe or uncomfortable, you book a flight home immediately. I don't care about the cost. Promise me." I promised Dad, but it's probably just honeymoon stress. We'll be home in 3 days anyway. The day after that call, I received an alert from my bank. Someone had attempted to open a new account using my personal information with Marcus listed as an authorized user. The attempt had been flagged due to the security measures I had implemented. I realized then that I couldn't wait for their return to confront the situation. I needed to be prepared for whatever Marcus had planned. With my lawyer's help, I gathered all the evidence of Marcus's deception financial troubles and apparent plans to access my assets. I also prepared documentation of the steps I had taken to protect the inheritance. When Sarah and Marcus returned from their honeymoon, I invited them to dinner at my home the following evening. Sarah accepted, saying they would be there at 7. I spent the intervening time rehearsing what I would say, how I would present the evidence, without alienating my daughter. They arrived precisely at 7. Sarah looked tan, but tired with dark circles under her eyes, partially concealed by makeup. Marcus appeared confident as ever, shaking my hand firmly and complimenting my home as if he'd never been there before. Over dinner, Marcus steered the conversation toward business almost immediately. "Johnny, I've been thinking about Stone Real Estate. The company has tremendous unrealized potential. With my financial expertise and your industry knowledge, we could really expand the operation." "Is that so?" I asked mildly. "And what exactly did you have in mind?" "Joint ownership," he said, without hesitation. "I could come in as CEO with you as chairman emeritus. We'd need to restructure some assets, take on strategic debt for expansion. I've already spoken to some investors who are interested." "Interesting," I said. "And what would your role entail specifically?" "Overall direction, financial management, investment allocation," he replied smoothly. "I'd need full signatory authority, of course, to move quickly on opportunities." Sarah looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. Maybe we should talk about this another time. We just got back and I'm still pretty tired. Actually, I said, I think this is the perfect time to clear the air. I went to my desk and returned with a folder. Before we discuss any business arrangements, Marcus, there are some matters we should address. Dad, Sarah began, but I held up a hand. Please, Sarah, this concerns you too. I turned to Marcus. I know about your previous marriages. I know about your termination from Bradshaw Financial. I know about your debts, the credit cards, the gambling losses, the tax liens. Marcus's confident facade cracked slightly, but he recovered quickly. I don't know what you're talking about. Whatever you think you know. I have documentation, I continued calmly. Bank records, court filings, credit reports. I also have evidence that you've been attempting to access my accounts without authorization. Sarah turned to Marcus, her face pale. What is he talking about? Marcus's expression hardened. Your father is making things up because he doesn't approve of me. He never has. He turned to me. This is slander. You have no proof of anything. I opened the folder and laid out the investigator's reports complete with documentation. Everything is here, Sarah. His real name, his financial history, the attempts to access my accounts, even records showing he was researching our family before he ever coincidentally met you. Sarah's hands shook as she picked up the papers. Marcus, is any of this true? For a moment, he seemed to consider continuing the denial. Then his expression changed to one of calculated anger. So what if some of it is true? Everyone has financial problems sometimes. I was going to fix everything. We would all benefit. Benefit from what? Sarah asked. Your father's inheritance, Marcus snapped. The millions he's been hiding from you. Sarah looked at me in confusion. What inheritance? This was the moment I had been dreading, but there was no avoiding it now. My father left me his estate when he died, about $10 million, and his company. $10 million, Sarah whispered. And you didn't tell me. I was going to after the wedding. I wanted to make sure you were marrying for the right reasons. And thank God he didn't tell you, Marcus interjected bitterly, because you would have told me, and then the prenup might have been different. He manipulated us both. I protected my daughter, I corrected him, and it turns out I was right to be cautious. Sarah was still processing the revelation. All this time you've had this money, and you kept it from me. Yes, I admitted. And I'm sorry for not being honest with you, but I was concerned about Marcus's intentions, and I wanted to wait until after the wedding to tell you. So you could control how I spent my inheritance? She asked, a hint of her mother's temper flaring. No, I said firmly. So I could see if your husband loved you, for you, not for your potential wealth. I looked directly at Marcus. And now we know the answer. Marcus stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. I love Sarah. Yes, I have some financial troubles, and yes, I was interested in the business opportunities your father's company presented. That doesn't make me a criminal. What about the fake identity? I challenged. The hidden marriages, the attempts to access my accounts, precautionary measures, he said dismissively. In business, information is power. I was protecting our future. Sarah had been silent reading through the documents. When she looked up, her eyes were filled with tears. You told me you'd never been married before. It wasn't relevant, Marcus said. Those relationships were mistakes, business arrangements that didn't work out. And the $300,000 in debt, was that not relevant either? I was going to take care of it, he insisted. Once we combined our resources. You mean once you got your hands on my dad's money? Sarah interrupted, her voice hardening. Marcus's facade finally cracked completely. Wake up, Sarah. Do you think a girl from your background just happens to meet someone like me? Do you think architects from middle-class families end up in Laurelhurst? I was going to give you the life you wanted. I never wanted that life. Sarah said quietly. I wanted you. I thought you wanted me too. Don't be naive, Marcus sneered. Everyone wants money. Your father's been hiding it from both of us, playing the humble retired engineer while sitting on millions. At least I'm honest about wanting a better life. I remained silent, allowing Sarah to process everything at her own pace. She carefully stacked the papers and handed them back to me. I think I need some time to think, she said. This is a lot. Of course, I said gently. You can stay here if you want. That's not necessary, Marcus cut in. We're leaving. Sarah, get your purse. Sarah looked at him with new eyes. I'm not going anywhere with you tonight, Marcus. I need space. You're choosing him over me. Your husband, Marcus's voice rose. After he lied to you about the money that should be half yours. I'm not choosing anyone right now, Sarah said firmly. I'm choosing to take time to process all of this. Marcus's face contorted with anger. Fine. Stay here with Daddy. But don't think this is over. I'm entitled to half of everything you have, including your inheritance. I'll sue both of you if necessary. Actually, I interjected calmly, the inheritance is in an irrevocable trust established before your marriage. Sarah doesn't have direct access to it either. My lawyer can explain the details if you'd like to meet with him. Marcus stared at me, comprehension dawning. You set this up. You planned this. I protected what's mine, I said simply. Just as you planned to take what isn't yours. He grabbed his coat. This isn't over, Johnny. Not by a long shot. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Sarah collapsed onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. How could I have been so blind? I sat beside her, putting my arm around her shoulders. He's very convincing, and you wanted to believe in him. All those red flags, she murmured. The way he avoided your questions, how he always changed the subject when I asked about his past. I ignored everything because I wanted the fairy tale. We sat in silence for a long while before she spoke again. Why didn't you tell me about the inheritance, Dad? I sighed. At first, I was just processing it myself. $10 million is a life-changing amount of money, and my relationship with your grandfather was complicated. Then, when you brought Marcus home, something didn't feel right to me. I decided to wait and see. You didn't trust my judgment. I trusted your heart, I corrected gently. But sometimes the heart sees what it wants to see. I've made that mistake myself. Sarah leaned against my shoulder, just as she had done as a little girl when she was upset. What am I going to do now I'm married to someone I don't even know? One step at a time, I advised. For tonight, you'll stay here. Tomorrow we'll call my lawyer and discuss options. The most important thing is that you're safe, and you know the truth. She nodded, exhaustion evident in every line of her body. I can't believe this is happening. I know, sweetheart, I know. I held her close, wishing I could shield her from the pain ahead, but knowing that all I could do was be there to support her through it. We'll figure it out together. We always have. That night, as Sarah slept in her childhood bedroom, I sat in my study looking at the family photos on my wall. I felt no satisfaction in being right about Marcus, only relief that the truth had come out before real damage was done, and sadness for the pain my daughter was experiencing. Perhaps keeping the inheritance secret had been manipulative in its own way. But as I looked at Sarah's wedding photo, at her radiant smile next to Marcus's calculated one, I couldn't bring myself to regret my decision. Sometimes the greatest gift a parent can give is the truth, even when it comes wrapped in pain. 6 months after that fateful dinner, Sarah was officially divorced from Marcus. The process had been messy but mercifully quick, thanks to the prenuptial agreement and the overwhelming evidence of Marcus's deception. He had made threats, hired an aggressive lawyer, and tried to claim half of everything Sarah owned, including future inheritance. But without access to unlimited funds for legal fees, and faced with evidence that could potentially lead to fraud charges, he eventually settled for a modest cash payment that barely covered his legal costs. Those months were difficult for Sarah. She moved temporarily into my guest room, cycling through anger, embarrassment, grief, and self-recrimination. Some days she could barely get out of bed. Other days she would clean the entire house with frantic energy, as if trying to erase all traces of her mistake. "I keep thinking about what I missed," she told me one evening, as we sat on the deck watching the sunset over Puget Sound. There were so many warning signs. The way he always had an excuse when bills arrived, how he never wanted me to meet his friends from work, the calls he would take in another room. "Hindsight makes everything clearer," I said. "Don't be too hard on yourself." "But you saw it, Dad. You tried to warn me, and I shut you down." I had suspicions, not proof, and I wasn't exactly forthcoming either. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. "I've been thinking a lot about the inheritance and why I kept it from you." Sarah looked at me, waiting. "I told myself it was to protect you, to make sure Marcus loved you. For you. But that wasn't the whole truth." I took a deep breath. Part of me was afraid the money would change our relationship, that you might see me differently, or that you wouldn't need me anymore. "Dad," Sarah said softly, "I will always need you. Not for money, but for this." She gestured between us. "For being the person who tells me the truth, even when it's hard. For loving me enough to let me make my own mistakes." A week later, I officially shared the details of the inheritance with Sarah. We met with my lawyer and the trustees to explain the structure I had created and my reasoning behind it. "The trust is designed to provide for both of us while preventing impulsive decisions," I explained. "You'll receive quarterly distributions and can request additional funds for specific purposes like buying a home or starting a business, but large withdrawals require approval from the trustees." "So you're still controlling the money," Sarah noted, though her tone wasn't accusatory. "I'm protecting it," I corrected. "For both of us, and for any grandchildren you might give me someday. Your grandfather built this wealth over decades. I don't want to see it disappear in a few years of poor decisions." Sarah nodded slowly. "I understand. After what happened with Marcus, I get why these protections are important." Over the following months, Sarah rebuilt her life. She returned to her architecture firm with renewed focus and passion. She moved into a modest apartment that she could afford on her own salary, though I offered to help with the deposit. "I need to do this myself, Dad," she insisted. "I need to remember who I was before Marcus, what I valued." I watched with pride as she reconnected with old friends, resumed volunteer work with Habitat for Humanity, and gradually regained her confidence. She even started therapy to understand why she had been so susceptible to Marcus's manipulation. "The therapist says I was looking for something I thought was missing," she told me. "The glamour, the excitement, the sense of being chosen by someone special. But really, I already had everything important." As for me, I found purpose in managing my unexpected wealth responsibly. I established a scholarship fund for engineering students from low-income backgrounds, naming it after Julie. I invested in several affordable housing developments, insisting they include sustainable features Sarah had always advocated for. And I started mentoring young construction professionals, sharing the knowledge I'd accumulated over decades. One year after discovering Marcus's deception, Sarah and I sat in my backyard looking through old photo albums. We had made it a monthly tradition, a way to reconnect with our shared history and remember Julie. "I found something interesting in Mom's papers," Sarah said, pulling an envelope from her bag. Inside was a letter Julie had written to Sarah on her 10th birthday, to be opened when she turned 21. Sarah read a passage aloud. "Remember that true wealth isn't about money or possessions. It's about having people in your life who love you for exactly who you are, not what you can give them or do for them. Your father may not be perfect, but he loves you this way, and I hope you find others who do too. We sat in silence for a moment, both thinking about how prescient Julie's words had been. You know, Sarah said finally, in a weird way, I'm almost grateful for what happened with Marcus. Grateful? I asked, surprised. It taught me what Mom was trying to tell me in this letter, about recognizing true love versus conditional love. She reached over and squeezed my hand, and it showed me that sometimes keeping a secret can be an act of love too. I thought about the $10 million that had nearly destroyed my daughter's life but ultimately helped her find clarity. I never wanted to keep things from you. I just wanted to protect you. I know, Dad, and thank God you did. She smiled a genuine smile that reached her eyes in a way I hadn't seen since before the wedding. By the way, I'm having coffee next week with David from the firm. He's an architect in the Sustainable Design Division. Very down-to-earth, drives a 10-year-old Subaru and volunteers at the animal shelter. I laughed. You don't need my approval. No, she agreed. But I value your insight, and this time I'm keeping my eyes wide open. As the sun set over the yard where Sarah had played as a child, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The inheritance that had seemed like such a burden, such a potential source of conflict, had ultimately brought us closer together through the painful lessons it taught us both. Money can't buy happiness, but sometimes it can buy clarity. And in the end, that clarity, about who we are, what we value, and who truly loves us, is worth more than all the millions in the world. Have you ever kept a secret to protect someone you love? Do you think there are times when not sharing information is the right choice? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found value in this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Remember that sometimes our intuition is trying to tell us something important. Don't ignore those gut feelings. Thank you for listening to my story today, and I wish you wisdom in all your important life decisions.